Live from Atlanta, Georgia, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I am your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We have an exciting guest. Before we get started, I'd like to let you know we are on Facebook Live as well as YouTube. You can go to YouTube, Zach Ballinger, pull it up there and subscribe to the channel, and you get to ask questions live in the box. So without further ado, Jada Phipps, thank you so much for joining the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So Jada, what we're going to do real quick, just for the audience out there listening, we're going to go through some quick questions just to learn more about your career. We'll get into the long format questions. We did have a couple of students who asked some questions before the show about getting into being a veterinarian. So we'll go through that. How does that sound?
Okay. Sounds good.
So what is your exact occupation and title?
I am a small animal emergency veterinarian. So I see things that are not your basic vaccines, daytime emergencies. I work in a 24/7 clinic. So hit by cars, trauma, things like that.
And how many years have you been a veterinarian?
I've been practicing for 12 years.
And what do you like most about your job? What are you passionate about?
Well, definitely the patients. It's always different. You never know what's going to come through the door. And as cliche as it sounds, having those little eyes look back at you when you know that you've helped them. There's nothing like that in the world.
That's awesome. And this is kind of a tough question for folks. Others can answer it pretty quick, but what do you like least about it? What's some things you should know as a veterinarian that's some challenging or maybe that you just don't like?
My very least favorite by far is that money comes into play. You have to have money to treat your pet. And oftentimes that's a deciding factor as to whether or not we're able to give an animal the full treatment that it requires.
Gotcha. And then what is your education certifications? You know, let's say somebody out there is in college and they have dreamed about being a veterinarian. Can you walk them through what does that look like?
Of course, after high school, I actually decided to go into veterinary technology. I had initially no desire whatsoever to be a veterinarian. But I knew I wanted to work in the field, so I became a veterinary technician. I went to Lincoln Memorial University, got my bachelor's degree there, and then I thought, well, let's try, and I will apply to vet school and see what happens. Because if I don't try, I'll never know. And I got in, so the rest is history. And it was the best decision I've ever made.
And how many years did you have to go through vet school?
Vet school is 4 years. Usually it's 3 years of classroom work, and then your last year is clinical work. So you get to work on animals at that point.
And you kind of described it a little bit in the beginning, but what is a typical day for you? I know that's kind of challenging for a lot of folks because, you know, it varies. But if you had to say an average typical day, what does that look like?
So we may see a dog that is hit by a car with a broken leg. We might see a cat, a male cat that's blocked and can't urinate. We might see a dog that ate, we had a dog that ate a sponge. Yeah, we see things like monkeys get diabetes, so we see things like that.
And so now we'll kind of transition to long format questions. And so thank you for so much for introducing us to your career as a veterinarian. You know, let's touch back on something that I try to hit on a lot. So at first you said you were a veterinary technician and that you had no desire of being a veterinarian, but did you enjoy being a vet tech back then?
Oh, I love to be a vet tech. Absolutely. And I feel like, of course, I'm a huge advocate for veterinary technology. I think veterinary technicians are the backbone of veterinary medicine. And if you can do that, and if you're able to work in a veterinary clinic and you learn the ins, the outs, you learn how to hold the animals, you get to do all the fun stuff. You get to know the pets and know the owners better than the doctor does. And I miss that. I miss that a lot. When you're the vet, you're the one that's making those decisions, those difficult decisions, and having those difficult conversations for people's who, in many cases, that's their family member. That pet is their family. So it's difficult having to be the one to have those conversations, not to mention the student loan debt that often comes with going to veterinary school. And I didn't want to do that initially, but I'm
I,
glad I did.
I think your case is pretty cool because, I always tell people, whether they're professionals or students, to first try a field before they go whole hard into it. And being a
Absolutely.
veterinarian, you have to, first of all, you have to go through to get your bachelor's degree. And then you have to, like you said, you have to put the work in as far as getting into vet school. Then you have to finance that. You have to go on this long journey of 4 years. So why not get some practice as a tech? It's the same
Absolutely.
thing for any field. If you're going to be a doctor,
Absolutely.
recommend being a nurse. So I love that you were able to gain that experience. How did that help you in your career now?
Um, so much. It actually, and it actually really helps me with being able to work with the staff because I know exactly what the veterinary technicians, I know what I'm asking them to do because I've done it before. I know that me asking them to reposition an aggressive dog that's 80 pounds is not an easy thing to ask. So I get where they're coming from, and I knew exactly what I was getting into when I applied. I knew the good, the bad, the ugly. So it's very important. I totally agree with you. You really need to know what you're getting yourself into. It's not puppies and kittens all day. That's for sure.
And then, for um, you look at your development, I think somebody in your job as a doctor, it's, people don't think that you guys do any career development, but I would argue you guys do all the time because I'm sure you have to do continuing education courses as well and keep it up on medicines, whatever the trend is. So, can you talk about some of those things year and year that you do for your career development?
Yeah, they require, Tennessee requires 20 hours of continuing education. Um, I think for me too, and it's different for everyone. I've worked in general practice and I can start off working in emergency, especially if you're straight out of vet school and you don't know which way is up. You really need a mentor and you need someone that will kind of hold your hand. So to start off in a busy emergency practice is it's quite a bit to take on. I worked in day practice for 6 years before I decided I wanted to go to emergency. I've also worked in mixed animal practice, so I've done small animal and large animal. I do a little horse stuff on my free time because I enjoy it. So yeah, the beautiful thing about veterinary medicine is there are so many options and avenues that you can go through. Large, small animal, pocket pets, zoo animals. Um, USDA is a job source that you can do as well. It's a great career. Not that I'm biased at all, but
Well, and how does someone decide that? I guess I'm not in the field, but how does someone know if they're passionate about small animal, or I guess you called it pocket animal. We don't know all these terms that are out there for people, but like, how do you decide what to go in? Will that come pretty naturally once the student or professional finishes schooling?
so I work at a pretty big practice, animal emergency and specialty care in Knoxville. So we have LMU veterinary students that come in, and we also have a lot of UT students, just different students that we teach. And I know this may sound cliche, but you just have to experience it. So usually you can tell pretty quickly whether or not you're gonna fall in. It's a certain type of personality, character, I think that people have to be able to work with animals in general. Um, just so we had the conversation, because I hear it all the time. Euthanizing an animal or putting an animal to sleep is a very difficult thing to do. It's a difficult thing for most people to come to the decision to put their pet to sleep. Um, and people, I don't want to say don't typically, but I have never been in a situation, nor would I ever agree to a situation where someone was just euthanizing something because there's usually a reason. It has cancer, it's sick, something very bad is going on. And I've always said that if it gets to the point that it does not bother me anymore, then it's time for me to quit. So I think I speak for most veterinarians when I say it bothers you every time. And I've been there and I know what it feels like. It's very difficult. So that's something to consider too when you choose this profession. Compassion fatigue is a huge problem.
And just to circle back, I think you answered it, but one of the things you said you liked least about it was the financial decisions. And you kind of meant towards that, you meant that people don't have enough money to invest in an animal that might get hurt or be sick. Is that kind of what you meant?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know for myself working in a specialty practice, I mean, to be perfectly transparent, I've often given prices to people that I've thought, you know, like, I don't know if I would be able to pay. Well, I know that I wouldn't be able to pay that for some of my pets. And would I be able to, sell something? And in many cases, folks can't. And it's a huge factor. And I hate that.
Sure. Thanks for being open and honest about that, because that's something people do need to think about before they enter in any career. Little stuff like that, and I say little, but that's a big deal to see. Having to deal with that on a daily basis. So you're exactly right. You touched on something else that I hit on all the time: is you really need to have a mentor, no matter what career you decide to do. I love how you brought that to the point that you got right to it. Once you finish vet school, you need to have a mentor. No matter what career you're doing, a mentor is key because they can teach you a lot of different things, and they're an experienced professional already in the field, and you can spend time with them and, take them coffee. I know during COVID, there's a lot of things that have shut down the one-on-one meetings, but I always suggest even doing a virtual Uber Eats lunch, offer to have an Uber Eats deliver.
That's a good idea.
Schedule a meeting and talk with your mentor over that. And so there's really no excuses now. There's mentor.com. There's all kinds of agencies. There's LinkedIn. So how did you find a mentor, out of curiosity, back then?
I got so lucky. I really did. I know a lot of my classmates didn't have this experience, but it was a veterinarian that I'd worked for before. I had initially not intended to go back to the practice to work. But it was the perfect situation. I learned so much from him, and he'd been practicing for 30 years. He's still practicing. He's not. And I just feel very blessed to have worked with him. His name is Dr. James. He was in Knoxville at Broadway Vet Clinic, and I was truly blessed to have had such a great mentor. I learned so much.
That's awesome. And think about your back at your career, going to being a veterinarian, from your bachelor's to your getting in and going through that. When I talk to successful people or people that have finished their certifications or degrees, they often have adversity in their story. And that could mean anything from failing a test, as simple as that, or to, dropping out and having to go back, or a medical diagnosis, or just different
we're gonna
things.
go there. Okay.
So it could be anything.
No, you're absolutely right.
Something that while you were going through this, what was one of the setbacks you can remember?
That was actually a really easy question. My mother was diagnosed with a meningioma, a brain tumor. I don't know if you knew that exactly, but it was my first year in vet school, and it was very difficult just to be in that first year and get used to that workload, period. But to add on to my mom going through all those things, I wound up taking back a year. So it took me 5 years, because I stepped back and actually went through my second half of my first year again because of all that was going on with my mom. My mom's since passed from breast cancer, and heart disease, but yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot during vet school. And I think depending on the college that you choose, at least for University of Tennessee, they were very understanding, and they really want you to succeed. And I would say that's true for most veterinary colleges or professional colleges, whatever you choose.
And that had to be pretty difficult, obviously that goes without common sense saying, but also at the same time, you're you're wondering your first year probably, is this a smart career decision? Given that I'm going to have to take a little bit slower route to be with mom and then having the stress of school to deal with. So I'm sure at some point there was probably doubts whether you even should be on this path.
I will say and I don't know, maybe I'm an exception to the rule. I never have once doubted that this is where God wanted me to be. Even after I've been working in veterinary medicine for a total of 19 years. Can you believe that? And I'm more passionate now about it than I was when I started. So for me, that's never been a question as to whether or not I was on the right path. It was just, okay, how am I going to get to the end? How do I get to the finish line? I don't care how long it takes, but I'm going to get there. And I hope most people will. I had a lot of support, and that would be another thing I would recommend is for folks to get support wherever you can, to have that reminder, hey, there is a finish line. It's hard to see from here, but there is a finish line.
And, and how did you, because there's a lot of people out there, according to the Gallup polls, 70% of Americans don't like their line of work. They would probably look at you and be kind of jealous because they would say, well, you knew exactly what you wanted to be. You knew what your passion was. It was animals. You went and did it. How do you find that?
I don't know. I never, like I said, I never really had the plan to be a veterinarian per se. I just knew I wanted to work with animals. And the first job I had was at a dog kennel. So I was scooping poop and cleaning up cages. There was nothing medical about it. And yeah. And then I wanted to do more. And the more I got involved, it wound up small animals the easiest to get into. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to know. And it just kind of fell out that way. So I never planned on being a veterinarian. It just kind of worked out. So I guess the first would be find your passion.
I think you've said a couple of things that I've got a new book coming out in the fall that'll really help people put them on a path that can find this. And a lot of people that I interview, it seems to be the same common things. We've mentioned them before. Having a mentor, entry level jobs. But another thing I tell people to do is diversify their portfolio. And I don't mean that in a financial sense. I mean that in a job sense. So do things on the weekend, or if you enjoy something, volunteer for it. So, or do an entry level job. For example, you did scooping poop in your quotes.
Yeah.
Very, very entry level. Let's just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so from that moment, though, you could just probably tell if, animals would be something that you would want to continue in, or if it's, hey, I don't want to be around animals. And so I think the more things we dip ourselves into, and the more things that will be in our favor. So another question for you: what skill set do you need to be a veterinarian?
I think compassion is a huge thing. For myself, working in emergency, I see people at their most upset. They are very, they're very upset. So you have to be able to communicate. And that's probably true, I imagine, with any career. Most people think veterinarians, so you work with animals. You don't have to worry about talking to people, but animals don't bring themselves in. So I don't care what career you choose. Communication is absolutely key. You've got to learn to talk to people, and listen to people, hear what they're saying. And that way you can meet them wherever they are so that you can accomplish whatever goal you want to accomplish, whatever it may be.
It's awesome. And, looking back when you were little, it doesn't have to be a veterinarian, obviously, but did you have a career that you always dreamed about being when you were in elementary school?
I think, like in one of my yearbooks, I put that I wanted to be a zoologist, which is hilarious because during vet school, we, had a lot of my classmates want to do zoo work. And I had zoo, not because you can't touch them. So, But again, it was animals. It's always kind of been animals.
Wow. So even in that time, the animal um, component still surfaced, and that's another thing. Not to that you're trying to sell my book for me or anything, but that's another
No,
thing.
go right it.
That's another thing I talk about is, I think sometimes if we look back when we were young, our answers right in the window, or right in the door. Sometimes we don't see it. For me, teaching and presenting was always there, and even my fourth grade teacher said, we all know, Zach, you're going to be a teacher one day. Well, I didn't know that there was 100 different career pathways that you could excel in having teaching skills. So, just like you said, that animal passion was always there, even when you were young. But you had admitted when you were a tech that wasn't something that you were even sure that you wanted to be a veterinarian. So I think that's just shows the importance about looking back in your childhood and digging around. So I appreciate you sharing that. I did want to get to the questions that the students asked over. They actually emailed before the show began, but one of the questions is, what required sciences do I need to take to be a veterinarian? And I'm sure that they probably need to talk with their advisor, because that's probably changed since me and you were in school, but you can take a stab at it.
Yes, exactly. I wouldn't imagine that too much is changed. I'm sure biochem and your chemistries and all of those are probably still required, but I'm sure it's different for each school. I went to UT, Tennessee, so I don't know. I think also the standardized test has changed also since I went. And I think it's going to be based on whatever school you choose. But your sciences and your chemistries and all the horribly hard stuff is, unfortunately, that's part of it.
And this next question says, which veterinarian school is the best and which one should I decide to go to?
That's a trick question. Of course, University of Tennessee. No, I have only have experience really with UT. We do have a lot of, and Tennessee. I really only know a little about Tennessee. We've had a couple of St. George and the island schools. There's a couple of schools on the islands that you go to. Some students can apply for. They go out there to the island schools for like 3 years. I'm sorry, I don't know what all the island schools are. St. George and Ross, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, and then you come back for your 4th year to a school in the States. I don't know what the cost is for all of that. I'm guessing probably pretty expensive. And then Lincoln Memorial University just opened a veterinary school. We've gotten a lot of students from there. I haven't actually seen that school, but I know it's brand new. I went there for undergrad, obviously. And we've had some good students through there. But University of Tennessee is the only one I can really speak highly of.
Very good. I graduated there too, so good answer.
Yes, you did. And my husband did too.
So does it matter, on the flip side, somebody asked, does it matter which veterinarian school I go to get the best career?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And I think in any school, no matter their career, it's you get what you put into it. So, and if there happens to be a school that maybe focuses more on zoo animal, or of course, if you're interested in marine animal and you want to be closer to the water, those might be some considerations to make. But otherwise, I think you have to learn it all anyway. You have to learn all the species, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think as pet owners, or if you're going to a doctor or you're a lawyer or a CPA, the first question I don't ask is, hey, where'd you go to school? It's can you solve my problem? It's can you solve my problem that I'm having? And so I've imagined the people that come to you with their pets, they're not saying, Dr. Phipps, can I see your where you went to school before you take care of my dog? I'm sure that doesn't enter into the equation.
Not typically, no.
So last question somebody asked is there other careers, if you enjoy animals, is there other careers you can do other than being a veterinarian or a vet tech?
Absolutely. There's all sorts of animal caretakers. I mentioned dog kennel, but there's tons of others. There's lots of rescues, all sorts of organizations like that. Kind of depends on what type of animal that you're interested in working with. I know there's a lot of horse stuff that goes around where they work with children with disabilities and things like that. I think that's a wonderful thing to get into. So there's tons of things. Cattle, USDA stuff. Like I said, there's all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
And, just to touch on that and finish out, another thing for that kind of question as well is look in your community. Look how many volunteer I mean, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm sure there's so many rescues that need your
Oh
help.
yeah.
Need you just to pitch in. And that would be a great way for you to get involved on the animal side, to give back to your community, as well as meet, network with people and get involved in helping the animals and see if it's something you want to do, right? I mean, you can easily go to a rescue and they probably need your help right now.
Absolutely. Even if you just go, hey, I'll clean some cages. We used to have people when I worked in day practice, they would bring newspapers because we would use newspaper for cat litter. They would bring just old blankets, which would be great. So anything like that, and you're absolutely right. I don't care what your career is, networking. It's all about, hey, I've seen this person's face before. When I first was putting resumes out, and I know, Zach, you probably know more about this than I do, but I'd read in one of our resume books to send your resume out. I would go bring my resume so they saw my face, and then I would send a thank you card afterwards just to say, hey, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And that way I'd kind of put that plug in so that they would not just take my resume and throw it like under the stack of papers that they had. So just any way you can get to to help them remember who you are.
Yep, you're singing my language. Networking is the key. If you look at the average job, an average hiring manager looks at a resume in North America for 6 seconds. So if they've got a stack of 200 resumes, how are you going to make your resume stand among the competition? That's easy. That's networking. So, thanks for touching on that. So, Dr. Phipps, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been really informative. I think people out there that have wanted to always dream about a veterinarian school, they can listen to this video and be able to tell if it's an area that they want to go into. So thank you so much for your time, and we really enjoyed having you.
All right. Thanks, Zach.
All right. Take care.